Should you avoid situationships?
There comes a time in every modern love story where you sit across from someone, coffee half cold, playlist too romantic for the silence, and you ask yourself, what are we?
And the answer is often, we're just vibing. Welcome to the world of situationships. No labels, no clarity.
Just chemistry, convenience, and chaos disguised as freedom. You meet someone, it starts off casual. A few late night texts, some flirty memes, a few too many deep conversations at 2 a.m. that make you feel seen in ways that feel dangerous. They say they don't want anything serious, but somehow they never let you go either. You're not dating, but you act like you are.
You don't belong to each other, but you still feel betrayed. There's no commitment, yet you keep waiting for the maybe, for the someday, for the let's see, and slowly you shrink. Because love is not supposed to feel like waiting in limbo. Connection is not supposed to come with conditions. Situationships are the emotional version of standing barefoot on a fence. 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and eventually it hurts to stand still. Should you avoid situationships? Yes, if peace matters more than potential. Yes, if you've outgrown the thrill of uncertainty. Yes, if you're finally choosing clarity over chemistry, because you deserve love that names you, love that's not afraid to claim you,
love that doesn't leave you guessing. Let situationships be the lesson, not the lifestyle. 1. The ambiguity of situationships live in the gray.
They are neither here nor there, too intimate to call casual, too uncertain to call love. They begin with the allure of no pressure and the illusion of freedom. You meet someone who clicks with you in all the right ways, yet when you ask what this is, you're met with shrugged shoulders, smirks, or that one haunting phrase, let's not label it.
And while your mind may nod in agreement, your heart starts keeping track of every unspoken promise.
This in-between space may feel thrilling at first. You're free, technically. No obligations, no labels, no explanations.
But as the connection deepens, so does the confusion. You share your secrets, your time, your bed, but not your status. You start calling them someone, because friend feels wrong and partner feels like a lie, and slowly the lack of labels becomes the loudest thing in the room. It echoes in every unanswered message and every moment you want to ask, are you seeing someone else? But stop yourself, because technically they owe you nothing. What makes situationships so emotionally disorienting is the disconnect between action and definition. They'll make you feel special, like you're the only one, like you matter deeply until you try to define what you are. The moment you ask for clarity, things shift. You're told not to ruin the vibe, not to rush it, not to catch feelings. But how can you not when every interaction feels so intentional, so close to what love is supposed to feel like? It's like holding a book with no ending, flipping pages that never quite reach a resolution. In situationships, your emotions evolve while the relationship remains still. You're constantly doing emotional math, wondering if you're overreacting, if you're asking for too much, if wanting clarity means you're clingy. You begin to censor your feelings to stay low maintenance, when in reality you're just trying to find solid ground in someone else's emotional fog. This ambiguity chips away at your confidence, making you question what you deserve, even though deep down you already know.
The truth is, emotional ambiguity isn't freedom, it's emotional labor in disguise.
You're carrying the weight of something undefined, tiptoeing around your own needs just to keep someone else comfortable. You keep telling yourself it's fine, that it's casual, that you're okay with it, but the body keeps the score, and so does the heart. And eventually, the lack of clarity begins to feel like quiet rejection wrapped in a pretty connection. #2. From casual beginnings to emotional depth,
Most situationships don't begin with grand confessions or deep commitments.
They often start with late-night texts, a mutual attraction, and the unspoken agreement that this isn't anything serious. Maybe it's the timing. Maybe one or both of you just got out of something heavy. So you tell yourself you're just having fun, no strings attached, just two people enjoying each other's company, until the company starts feeling like comfort, and the comfort begins to feel like connection. What starts as casual quickly turns into something else when routine sneaks in, when good morning texts become expected, when your inside jokes outnumber your boundaries, when you start noticing their moods, reading into their silences, and feeling the tug of something that looks a lot like care. But the danger is, it's not just physical anymore, it's emotional. You find yourself thinking about them when they're not around.
You wonder how their day went. You miss them in quiet moments, and somewhere along the way, casual starts sounding like a lie you keep telling yourself to stay safe. It's tricky, this emotional entanglement, because it grows silently. There's no official start, no title to announce, no moment where it all shifts. You just wake up one day and realize you feel too much for something that's still being called nothing serious. And that's the catch. Your feelings evolve, but the relationship doesn't. It stays paused at undefined, even as you find pieces of yourself getting attached. And it's hard to admit, because weren't you the one who said you didn't want anything serious? In situationships, vulnerability creeps in quietly. You start opening up about things you usually hide. They start showing you sides of themselves that feel real, raw, maybe even rare. You share playlists, dreams, bad days. You bond over mutual fears, shared wounds, unresolved hopes. And you begin to believe that maybe, just maybe, this is more than what either of you said it would be. But every time you try to name it, you feel the tension rise, like crossing an invisible line you weren't supposed to notice. The problem isn't that you caught feelings, it's that you weren't allowed to. You're emotionally entangled in a space where deep connection is allowed, even encouraged, but commitment is not. You gave your heart to something built on a foundation of denial, and now you're stuck feeling deeply in a place where feelings aren't supposed to matter.
That's what makes situationships so cruel. They offer intimacy without the safety net, and once you're in deep, it feels impossible to untangle without leaving pieces of yourself behind. #3. The illusion of a couple without the label. One of the most confusing things about situationships is how you start to act like a couple. Spending weekends together, meeting friends, sharing moments that feel intimate and exclusive without ever officially being one. You find yourself celebrating small anniversaries in your head, imagining a future that hasn't been spoken into existence. And yet, when you try to put a name to it, the words dissolve in the air, leaving you feeling like you're caught between two worlds, the comfort of connection and the void of definition.
This mismatch between behavior and status creates a powerful tension. You may share inside jokes, exchange good morning and good night messages religiously, and even make plans that stretch into weeks ahead. But when you're asked, "What are you two?" the answer feels impossibly vague. You're not just confused. You're caught in a cycle of unspoken expectations and assumptions.
Because acting like a couple without the official title means you're constantly guessing where you stand, while your heart quietly hopes for more. What complicates this further is how this gray area blurs boundaries. You might find yourself forgiving things you wouldn't tolerate in a relationship.
Missed calls become less about respect and more about trying to avoid conflict.
The lack of labels gives the other person an easy escape route. No commitments to break, no promises to keep, no accountability to uphold.
And for you, it feels like your emotions are hanging in the balance, always vulnerable to being ignored, postponed, or dismissed. This emotional limbo also leads to unmet expectations. You expect the care, attention, and effort a partner would give, but the other person acts only as much as the situationship allows. It's a constant tension between hope and disappointment, hoping they'll finally step up, disappointed when they don't. Your mind keeps making excuses. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they don't express love the same way. Maybe it's still early. But deep down, your heart knows the truth. It's not about timing or communication style. It's about commitment or the lack of it. In the end, living in this state is like walking a tightrope. You crave stability, but get unpredictability. You want exclusivity, but are given freedom that feels more like abandonment. You share moments and intimacy that feel real, but are denied the security of a name. It's the paradox of situationships. The closer you get to someone, the more uncertain everything feels, and the more your expectations clash with reality. Hash 4. The hope for change that keeps you staying. One of the quietest reasons people stay in situationships is hope. The hope that someday the other person will decide to show up fully, to commit, to make it official. It starts as a whisper, a tiny seed planted by moments of connection, shared vulnerability, and fleeting glimpses of what could be. Maybe they say things that hint at future possibilities, or show care in ways that don't quite match their words. And in those moments, your heart convinces you to stay, to wait, to hold on just a little longer. This hope is both a comfort and a trap. It becomes the story you tell yourself when your feelings aren't returned with the same intensity. You rationalize the silence, the mixed signals, the inconsistent effort, imagining that they're just scared or busy or figuring things out. You cling to the what if. What if tomorrow they change their mind? What if one day they realize they want more? So you stay in a space that doesn't serve you yet feels familiar and strangely necessary, waiting for something that might never come. What's painful is that this hope often blinds you to your own needs. You begin to prioritize their feelings and timelines over your own. You start shrinking your expectations, lowering your boundaries, telling yourself that any attention is better than none. The emotional cost of waiting is masked by the belief that your patience will pay off. But in reality, hope becomes a way of postponing self-respect, a way to avoid facing the discomfort of walking away. There's a bittersweet paradox in hoping for change. It fuels endurance, but also breeds stagnation. You're stuck between wanting to move on and fearing the loss of what could have been. This liminal space is exhausting because it's full of emotional suspense, where every interaction feels like a test, every silence feels like a sign, and every small act of kindness feels like proof that change is on the horizon. Yet the truth is, change doesn't come when it's convenient. It comes when both people are ready. Sometimes the most courageous act isn't waiting for them to change, but changing your own story. Recognizing that hope, when unreciprocated, can become a slow form of self-sabotage. Staying in a situationship for the maybe someday often means putting your happiness on hold indefinitely. It's a quiet surrender to uncertainty that can cloud your ability to seek what you truly deserve. Clear, mutual, and respectful love. Hash 5. How uncertainty and inconsistency affect your emotional well-being. One of the hardest parts about being in a situationship is living with constant uncertainty. When there's no clear definition, no steady rhythm, your emotions become like waves, sometimes calm, sometimes crashing without warning. You're left wondering what the next text, call, or meeting means. Is it a sign they care, or just politeness? Are you important to them, or just convenient? This ongoing ambiguity wears down your emotional resilience, turning what should be joy into anxiety. Inconsistency is the other silent thief of peace in situationships. One day,
They might shower you with attention, making you feel seen and wanted. The next, they disappear without explanation.
This roller coaster of emotions triggers your brain to seek patterns, to predict what's next, but there is none. The unpredictability creates a sense of instability that seeps into your self-esteem.
You start questioning if you're too much, not enough, or simply unwanted, all because the one person you hoped to count on remains inconsistent. When emotional needs aren't met regularly, your sense of self-worth begins to erode.
You may start internalizing the gaps between words and actions, blaming yourself for the lack of commitment or clarity.
This self-doubt can lead to overthinking, self-criticism, and even withdrawal from other meaningful relationships. Slowly, you shrink to fit the space they're willing to give, dimming your own light to avoid rocking the boat or pushing them away.
What makes the emotional toll even more painful is that this uncertainty often feels like a personal failure. You might believe that if you were more patient, more understanding, or less demanding, things would change.
But the truth is, emotional well-being thrives on consistency, respect, and honesty, things that are missing when a relationship refuses to define itself. Being stuck in a cycle of hope and disappointment wears away at your mental health in ways that aren't always visible, but deeply felt. The heart and mind crave safety, the assurance that the people you care about will be there, will show up, and will honor your feelings. Situationships, by their very nature, deny you this security. The emotional drain they cause doesn't just affect your mood in the moment. It can ripple through your sense of identity, making you question what love means and if you deserve it at all. #6. The pain of waiting for clarity when they benefit from your confusion. Waiting for clarity in a situationship often feels like standing in front of a door that never fully opens. You hope, you ask, you nudge for answers, but the other person remains comfortably vague. What's harder to see is that this vagueness is often a choice, a way for them to keep things on their terms, while you wrestle with the uncertainty. In this silent negotiation, your confusion becomes a kind of currency they trade in, while you pay the emotional price. When someone benefits from your uncertainty, it means they gain freedom without giving commitment. They get to have your time, attention, and affection without the responsibilities that come with a defined relationship. You might believe you're the one clinging to hope, but sometimes the other person is quietly holding the power, letting you hang in that uncomfortable space between closeness and distance. This imbalance creates a dynamic where your feelings are on pause and their needs take priority. Holding on to hope for clarity in these situations is a slow form of self-betrayal. You betray your own emotional needs by putting your life on hold for someone who isn't ready or willing to meet you where you are. It's a painful compromise, where you sacrifice your peace and your sense of worth in exchange for the possibility of something that may never materialize. The act of waiting becomes a form of silent suffering, where you continuously hope for validation that never arrives. This dynamic also erodes your ability to trust your own instincts. When you're desperate for answers, you might ignore red flags or dismiss your own doubts because the fear of losing even the vague connection feels worse than facing the truth. But emotional clarity is a form of respect both for yourself and for the other person. When clarity is withheld, it's not just confusion you're left with. It's a message that your feelings aren't a priority. The hardest part is realizing that waiting for someone else to define what you mean to them isn't just frustrating. It's a rejection of your own agency. It's choosing to stay in a space that undermines your emotional well-being, rather than stepping into a space where your heart is valued and honored. And that recognition, while painful, is the first step toward reclaiming your power and setting boundaries that protect your heart.
#7. The temporary comfort and delayed growth of situationships can feel like a warm blanket on a cold night. A temporary comfort when you're not ready to face the raw edges of being alone or healing from past wounds. They fill the silence, distract from loneliness, and offer moments of connection without demanding the vulnerability that comes with true commitment.
In those early stages, this kind of arrangement can seem like exactly what you need: companionship without complications, closeness without the risk of heartbreak.
But beneath this soothing surface, there's a deeper story unfolding. The comfort found in situationships is often a mask for avoidance.
It allows you to stay busy with someone else's presence, to sidestep the uncomfortable work of processing your own emotions or reflecting on what you really want. You're sharing time and intimacy, but not the emotional investment that leads to growth. Because growth demands clarity, it demands truth, and it demands sometimes walking away from what no longer serves you, even if it feels safe. Situationships give the illusion of connection without requiring you to confront your own inner landscape.
Over time, this avoidance can create a kind of emotional stagnation. Instead of healing old wounds, you're patching them over with fleeting moments of affection and attention.
The space you might have used for self-discovery becomes crowded with someone else's ambiguity.
And while you may feel less alone, you're also less free, less able to understand your own needs, boundaries, and desires.
The comfort of not being fully alone, ironically, becomes a barrier to the deeper kind of freedom that comes with healing. Situationships often blur the line between love and fear. The fear of being alone, the fear of facing your own emotions, or the fear of rejection. This fear can keep you tethered to a connection that doesn't allow for true growth. You're holding on to what feels familiar rather than reaching for what's healthy. The emotional limbo that situationships create can delay the important life lessons that come from heartbreak, closure, and ultimately, self-love. It's like reading the prologue of your story over and over without turning the page. What makes this dynamic so challenging is that temporary comfort feels better than painful growth in the moment. You trade long-term healing for short-term relief, convincing yourself that this ambiguous bond is enough for now.
But growth and healing don't wait, they happen when you decide to be honest with yourself, to step into discomfort, and to seek relationships that nurture your full self.
Until then, situationships keep you suspended in a cycle that comforts without truly fulfilling. So, should you avoid situationships?
Maybe the better question is, should you avoid staying where you're not truly seen, not truly valued, and not truly free? Because love, real love, doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't ask you to shrink or settle. It invites you to show up fully, to be named, and to be cherished without conditions. Choosing clarity over chaos, respect over confusion, and peace over pain isn't just about avoiding situationships. It's about honoring yourself enough to demand more. To step into relationships where your heart is safe, your feelings are valid, and your presence is celebrated.
You deserve love that lights you up, not one that leaves you in the shadows. And when you choose that, you're not just avoiding situationships, you're choosing yourself. And that is the most powerful kind of love there is.